Okay, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to the very first FIMC-VI event of the 2021-22 school year. Wow. So this is a virtual water cooler. The topic is providing in-services to classroom teachers. And I am Liz Anderson, the coordinator of FIMC-VI. So I will be facilitating this webinar. And we do have a wonderful group of teachers that you see here that will be part of this webinar. We do have closed captioning available. So if you click on the CC button at the bottom of your, or it might be located somewhere else, but in your Zoom toolbar, that will turn on your caption for you. And this is a webinar format, so you do not have camera or microphone. But if you have questions or you want to contribute, you hear someone say something like, "Oh, I have a suggestion too," type it in the chat. Just make sure you change that right after the word "to" in your chat as a drop down. And if you change it to all panelists and attendees, then everyone will be able to see what you type in the chat so we can all contribute together. And so just so you can see what all of that looks like, on our next slide, you'll see, so here's where that CC button is and what that might look like. And then your captions will be on the bottom of the screen. And in that chat window, it's that little drop down right next to the word "to." And you're selecting all panelists and attendees. Okay. And so we do have this PowerPoint that I'm sharing right now, as well as one other handout available on our website, fimcvi.org/events, which Sherry put in the chat for us. That's the best place to go for any of our trainings that we're doing to find the handouts and registration links. And then this is being recorded. So this will be available on our past events page of our website, which has been reorganized. So if you had been on there before, you'll notice it looks a little different. But if you just type in the search box at the top of our website, you'll find what you're looking for there too. Okay, so our agenda, we're going to, we've got our welcome and introductions. Then we're going to have our panel discussion on providing an in-service to classroom teachers. And at the end, if there's any questions that we didn't address, we'll go over those. And then we'll do our evaluation and closing code. If you've been on our webinars, you know we always ask people to fill out an evaluation form. And then we will finish by 11:30. So then you can be off on your way to whatever wonderful plans you have for the rest of your day, excuse me. Okay. So we do have in-service and ACVRP credit available for this webinar, as do most of our trainings. Our opening code is student, STUDENT, student. And at the end of the webinar, I will be explaining how you can get that credit. And Sherry just typed in the chat what that opening code is. And Elaine, that's okay if you can only stay till 10:40. That's the beauty of recording. You can come back and watch the rest of it at your convenience. Okay, so now we're going to introduce our 4 panelists that we have here with us. I have had the privilege of working with all of these ladies at one point or another in my teaching career, so I'm really excited that we got all of them together here to have this conversation with us. So they're just going to tell us a little bit about their experience, what population they work with, what setting they're in right now. And we're going to start with Andrea.
Hello, my name's Andrea Ayala. I am a teacher of visually impaired, of course, as well as an orientation mobility instructor. I currently work at Armwood High School along with Leah at the resource room with kids in 9th through 12th grade, but I have experience working with elementary, multiple disabilities, the board.
All right, thank you, Andrea. And next we have Leah.
Good morning, my name is Leah Burkett. This is my 10th year teaching as a teacher of the visually impaired. I'm also O&M certified. I work at Armwood High School with Andrea, so we have 9th through 12th grade students. Most of my teaching career has been in the resource setting. So I have taught everywhere from pre-K students all the way up to the 12th grade.
Right, thank you, Leah. And next we have Shaylene.
Hi, I'm Shaylene Lamont. This is my 15th year of teaching, and I have always been in a middle school resource room, so 6th through 8th. I'm a TBI, obviously, and then also I have certification in O&M. I have had itinerant experience with O&M, but it's minimal, just 1 year. So primarily at the resource room.
Thanks, Shaylene. And last but not least, we have Teresa.
Yes, my name is Teresa, and I'm a teacher of the visually impaired in Hillsborough County. This is my 16th year as a teacher of the visually impaired. I have done itinerant in the past, but for the past 10 or 11 years, I've been in a resource room in an elementary setting. And I've had low vision students and completely blind students who are Braille readers.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so as you can see, we have a variety of experience here. So let's go ahead and do our discussion. I'm going to stop sharing. So we have a list of questions for this panel here. And so I'm going to go through and I'm going to be asking our group these questions. Hopefully we'll have some good conversation. And if you, as I said before, if you hear something, you're like, ooh, that, I have a question about that, or, this is what I've done, go ahead and type it in the chat. We all are here to learn from each other. So our first question, we're going to start with Shaylene. And so just to make sure we're all on the same page here, what is an in-service presentation? What is this topic that we're here to talk about?
Okay. So for me, an in-service presentation can be to any shareholder, so teachers, bus drivers and aides on bus, cafeteria staff, office staff, whoever's involved with a student. And the main focus for me is always to raise awareness, but also to provide partnership, like to start a partnership with these staff members so that the student or students, excuse me, experience holistic growth while they're in our school setting. So academically, in the ECC, social, emotional, across the board. So that's what it looks like for me, and it evolves over time. Obviously, when they're younger, it's probably more just direct, you and the teacher or shareholders. And then as they get older, for me in middle school, I like to really try to bring the kids into it, because the ultimate end goal is that the students are able to do it for themselves as they go into high school or later, in late high school, certainly college and work experience.
Yeah, so ultimately you're sharing that information about the student and helping those people understand what their needs are and getting them comfortable with that, right? Like it's nothing to be afraid of.
Exactly. And then just ensuring like they have a partner and a resource for questions and that you're always available, so that a lot of times it's just this deer in the headlights, right? Don't even understand it, which we have to understand. It's such low incidence disability. You can work your whole career as a teacher and never work with someone who's visually impaired. And so it's that beginning linkage to forming that partnership.
Right, thank you. Okay, so next question I have for Teresa. So what does an in-service typically look like for you?
Okay, well, in the elementary setting, which is where I am, I like to welcome the teacher into the vision program and let them know there's nothing to be scared of, that it's completely a team approach. I am ready to help them and let them get comfortable with having a visually impaired student in the classroom. I usually bring gifts as an introduction to the teacher. So I have one right here, that I've made. But anyway, I make these little, it's like a, business card.
Like a contact card, yeah.
Contact card, and I put a little bit of googly eyes on there so they know that we are, and it's also got some Braille on it. But these are just little cheapio cups that I got at Dollar Tree. But this is, this particular one is for a second grade classroom coming up because the students in there are low vision. And so I just put some little gifts in there. I've got a sticky pad. I have some 2020 pens. I have a nice bold black dry erase marker and a nice bold gel pen. That'll be helpful. And I like to bring presents to teachers. Sometimes I also bring in, like Clorox wipes or a box of tissues. So they love presents. So that kind of, calms everything down at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. I also provide them with what I call a helpful hint sheet. It's just a one sheet fact sheet about the student and their visual needs. And I suggest to them they could keep it with their sub-plans and put it right in there. And it's just explaining what the child sees, the equipment that they're bringing along with them, any sort of lead time that I would need to prepare materials for them, and just to let them know that I'm part of their team.
Great, thank you. Did any of you want to add anything to that? We can go to the next question. Oh, and I see we have some comments on the chat. People are loving the business card and the gift ideas, Teresa. So I think they're going to be borrowing that. Okay, so next question is for Andrea. So what school staff do you typically try to include in your in-services? And does that look different depending on grade level?
Sorry, I don't know if you could hear the thunder that just rolled through.
Yep, all good.
In an ideal world, you want to include all staff members that are going to be working with your student. Most importantly, you want your classroom teachers, any special teachers such as music, PE, etc., and then any therapist that may be new to working with the student. In the elementary setting, I often try to have an in-service with the whole class. That because little kids are always curious about what devices that they're using and stuff like that. And so I try to bring in those devices so that way all the kids can get their hands on it and see what our students are actually working with. So if I have a Braille reader in the classroom, I'll bring in a couple Braille writers and I'll let them scribble on the Braille writer. If they're using CCTVs, I let them look at the CCTV that they're using. And then in the middle school and high school setting, that's a little different. By then, most of the students have seen our students with their devices and they already know what they're capable of, what they're working with, and stuff like that.
Hi, thank you. And so it sounds like for you, so like when you're doing with the elementary, there's not like a formal, like you're not creating a PowerPoint or anything like that. You're just bringing those resources and doing like a demonstration and with the students and then with the staff. So kind of a multifaceted approach there.
Correct.
Hi. All right, so next question for Shaylene. So we talked about school staff that you want to include. For your students who receive orientation mobility, do you involve the O&M instructor? And if so, what does that look like?
So when I was at the elementary school, I was providing O&M services. I was included in her in-service, the TBI's in-service. And it was just a discussion because it was elementary. We're going to be doing a lot of room familiarization. There were routes within the classrooms. Some totally blind students really needed to work on. So I was going to be doing that push-in. At the middle and well, for me at the middle school, because I'm O&M, if they have an offsite O&M instructor who comes in, I'll certainly ask if they want to be included. Oftentimes, they'll say, here's what we're going to be working on, but it's pull out, right? So that these kids are typically working off campus. So they know how to familiarize themselves with their classrooms already. So oftentimes it just looks like me explaining what O&M is, how to do sighted guide in the events of emergencies myself. But if the O&M wanted to be involved, they certainly would be.
And then, so Shaylene, so you work mostly with the older kids. So I'm curious for Teresa, since you are working with those younger kids who they're learning those skills to use, like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I'm not O&M, But if we can't coordinate our approach together, I do offer sighted guide, or, you know, if the student is a cane traveler, a place where they'll be keeping that cane in their classroom. And then I also want to emphasize to them in any sort of safety drill that a visually impaired child is going to need an adult or responsible, you know, student with them, because in fast moving, crowded environments, for all of them, it can be very disorienting. So I do make that safety.
Yeah.
But for other equipment, I let them know that they aren't, the teacher know, because, you know, we're coming in there with screen readers and like iPad touch, you know, just really incredible looking equipment. And I say, okay, you don't have to worry about knowing how to work this. It's okay. You know, I will help the student learn how to work that. And then the little kids, it depends on their personalities, but some of my younger students are very comfortable. You know, that first day of school when they're doing all their class introductions, I'll go in with them and they provide the in-service to their classmates about the cool tools that they use. And that's the word that we use. We call them cool tools. You know, and they'll demonstrate their Braille writer or their monocular or their, you know, Ruby little handheld video magnifier or any other equipment that they're using.
Yeah, so then they know what it is, what it's for. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's a really good idea. So Leah, this is going to kind of feed off of what Teresa was just saying. But so what is the youngest student you've had participate in an in-service, and what did that look like?
The youngest student I had participate was a second grader. She was much so a little adult. So we did make a PowerPoint presentation. She led the full PowerPoint presentation. She provided instruction to her teachers on using her monocular, where she needs to sit to be most successful. But I also have had, I think it's important even if you have younger elementary students, that they are even present for the in-service, even if they don't have a speaking part, or even if they're just sitting there with their device. I think it provides, we're taking all this information we're sharing about a child, and we're adding that human factor to, they're able to see the child, and you know, they can ask the child question or the student question, and I think it makes for that student to be a little bit more comfortable too, that they're involved in that conversation that's happening about them. So I think even with little, I think we also have to remember they're kids, so it also has to be student led. What are they comfortable in sharing or not sharing, or how much participation do they want to be involved in that in-service? So I think as much as we can get them involved, I think any involvement, even if it's just sitting there, is really important for the classroom teachers.
Yeah, exactly. Because then it makes it more relevant, I think, than to just hear it from the adults, like, oh, the student is telling me what they need. So I'm curious for the whole group then. So you want those students involved. How are you preparing them to be involved? I mean, we know self-advocacy is so important. So what are you doing before you even get to that point, so they're ready to play whatever role it is that you're expecting them to play?
So prior to having the student in service, I meet with the teachers to give my own little in service, just to give a little bit more background information. That way, when the student comes in, the teacher's more comfortable, and I feel like it's a much more relaxed situation. Elementary and middle and high school can look very different. Like Teresa was saying, in the elementary setting, it's more teacher-led and more one-on-one. When we're getting to that middle school and high school, these students are having 6, 7 different teachers and a homeroom teacher. And there's so many more staff around the school involved, because there's cafeteria, bus, there could be riding the bus, the front office staff. So I once had a high school student make a trifold pamphlet. He didn't want to do a presentation. He didn't want to stand in front of a PowerPoint. He didn't like PowerPoints because he said, I can't see them, so I don't want to present one. So it made sense to me. So he made like a pamphlet, and he handed those out, and his process was, they can always have them in their desk. He went through the whole pamphlet and discussed his information, and the teachers loved it. So I think it's discussions at the beginning of the school year you're having with the student, how they will successfully feel in presenting this information to their teachers.
Yeah, exactly. Because every student's different. They have different, comfort levels. But yeah, I like that because I mean, a brochure, like that's a skill. Like, yeah, how are you going to put all
Oh
this
yeah.
information together and present it in a meaningful way? So yeah, that's a great idea.
And also to group in services too, having all of our students together present as a group. So those who are more comfortable and stronger in presenting, they are more than welcome to take over and present the whole presentation, which is great. And the kids who are a little quieter, they're still there, they're still involved, and they're still showing their face, but it's very difficult to for some of our younger ones to stand up in front of adults and tell them what they need. That's it. As much as we encourage self-advocacy, that's still very hard, even for me as an adult, to tell other adults what to do. So I think as long as we just keep it student-led, plus encouraging them to go a little farther in their presentations, I feel like we can't go wrong with that.
Yeah. And it's a skill that's constantly building, every year they're developing new things to be able to take more ownership of that. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Well, I think like definitely instruction in their own visual impairment and its implications, their accommodations, like just a global understanding of those things is so crucial because that's what they're going to speak to, right? And what they need. And then in my setting, obviously pre-planning week, I'm given the fact sheets like Teresa, and I'm meeting with teachers one-on-one. But then I work that first semester with my students as a group, and we present it like this is going to be a group activity, and we work to present to different students. It's not always students that are in their classes, but at the Great American Teach-In has always been a great opportunity for my students to have worked on those skills and then put it in action. And it doesn't even have to be with their classes. They're coming in middle school, you've transitioned where you're traveling on campus in elementary school as a class to, okay, the bell rang, get out, go, right? And so the interactions are very different. And so they liked a larger audience because they're impacted by the behaviors and interactions from peers that they don't even contact in their classrooms.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I hope some other people are able to take that and use it, because it's nice at the beginning of the year to do those things, but there are other opportunities that you might have throughout the year, and it's not like the students going somewhere else, they're still in that school. So any advocating and educating we can do is a good thing. Teresa, do you do I worked with Teresa for a very long time. I'll just say that. And I kind of remember she would work with her students the year prior before the end of the school year for what they were going to do the following year. So if you could speak to that a little bit.
Right. Usually we spend a lot of time in May, during a lot of FSA testing, that we work a lot on practicing our self-advocacy skills, because they know they're going to be moving to a new grade. And I say, well, you're going to have new friends. You'll have some old friends and you'll have some new friends. So we practice, what they're going to say, do a little presentation. Then they usually either braille up or write down just like an outline, I'm talking a second grade outline, they just a few words that they want to remember to talk. So they practice it a lot in May. And then sometimes if they're fortunate to go to ESY, I think they also work on that during ESY. So then when they come to usually open house, the pre-planning week, so I just remind them, okay, so you're going to have your new friends. And so we'll be in there with you the first day so you can tell them about all your cool tools.
Yeah.
I was also going to say, do you remember the white cane day? We made that video.
Yes.
Yes,
so that's another opportunity, white cane day.
Right, that you can make a video, and maybe the morning announcements at your school will play your video for you, because God love them, but a lot of kids call those canes a stick, you know, so it just takes that ongoing education for them it's a cane, it's not a toy, it's a tool. So, but that was it. Again, it depends on your students that you're working with, but if you're fortunate to have some that are very comfortable in front of a camera, it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So choose your adventure. Which way do they want to go with it? A video, a brochure, just a little presentation. Yeah.
And can I say, like Teresa's kids, a lot of them typically feed to the middle school where I'm at. And you can see when they show up at 6th grade that they've had those experiences, right? So we do it's called a summer bridge camp, and it's a 2-day camp for 6th graders, incoming 6th graders. And so they start off in the cafeteria. Well, you can imagine it's a couple of hundred kids in a cafeteria with all kinds of staff. And one of her students, when he entered 6th grade recently, he just stood up and introduced himself and said, look at my cool Braille note, and this is what I use, and I travel with this cane. And the principal was like, I can't believe he was just so comfortable. And that's because for all of those years, it started with, my cool tools to, building up to the video and making rap songs about his eye disease and presenting those at Mother's Day luncheons and things like that. And so it just built from year to year to year. And that's it. That's the end goal, is that eventually they're on their own doing it.
That particular group was very fun. They were stair-stepped, and those three particular students, they all had retinal problems. So yes, they created the retina wrap, and they presented that to their moms at our Mother's Day tea party. But they had all gotten to that point, and they're comfortable. This is the part of me that's really just different than everybody else. I'm the same every other way, except for this part of my eye works different. So.
Right. And when they're comfortable, it just lends itself to other people being comfortable.
Exactly.
To piggyback off that, now when they get to the high school setting, last year in particular, I spoke with a student about this when we're going to do your in-service, and he said, oh, I already talked to everybody. I gave them the sheets and they're good. Oh, you don't need to speak with them? No, they're fine. And I did go and eventually check in with them, and all the information I told them, oh yes, we already know all about that student. So it's the progression, all those skills build up. So oftentimes when they become 11th and 12th graders, they're often organizing and leading their own in-services, which is great. We want to be, second in line when they get older, to where the student is really providing that information on their own.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, because once they're out of high school, that's what they're going to have to do. Wherever they go, they're going to have to tell somebody, like, this is what I need. So that's a beautiful thing. And just like any skill, it takes time to develop it. Like, you don't just magically have it. So they need practice, and they need multiple experiences doing that. So yeah. So that's awesome. Okay, so let's go to another question, which kind of relates to most of you right now. I think right now you are all in resource settings. So I wanted to ask Andrea, so you have had experience being an itinerant teacher as well, and I know the rest of you have, but for Andrea, so how does providing in-services at the cluster site, like a resource room, differ from being an itinerant teacher?
Yes, so this is my first year actually as a resource teacher. So all of my experience has been itinerant, and it's very, very different. It's much harder, but you just get good at practicing it. And what I tend to do is I tend to create those fact sheets. I email them out to all the teachers that are going to be working with these students. Then I try to set up a time with them to do the in-service with them in person, but that's not always the case. All of our teachers are usually being pulled into meetings. They have their own planning that they have to do. So sometimes I don't even get to see them until the first time that I walk in there to meet with the student. But I give them that fact sheet, so that way they're not walking into working with that student completely blind themselves. And Yeah, that's usually what I do. I just try my best to meet with them during pre-planning, but it doesn't always work because as an itinerant teacher, you are literally, you can be on one side of the district and then have to go all the way to the other side of the district.
Yeah, and if you're serving multiple schools and the
Mhm.
student has multiple teachers, so yeah, that definitely is more challenging. I mean, it sounds like so you could still like we've been talking about the different things that students can make, so you could still send those to the teacher in addition with your fact sheet. So maybe they have a video that they can watch or whatever the student created. So here's something from them. Look at it at your own leisure when you have the time, and then try to connect and address the questions that they have.
That's in
Yeah.
an ideal world. Most of the time in my itinerant world, I never get the same students that I worked with the year before. So the only ones I have are usually my O&M students. And with that, I don't really do much in services unless they need a lot of assistance on campus. But most of my students have been high schoolers or middle schoolers, and they do off-campus O&M. But yes, that would be great if there's some other teachers that work on that, and then you can grab it from them. That's why it's always good to have communication with prior teachers of the visually impaired as well.
Yes.
That's important.
Yes, and that reminds me of when we all met before and we're talking about this, like that making those connections across grade levels between the teachers. So I don't know if one of you wants to talk to that, like how the classroom teachers can help a teacher in another grade level who's like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
So I can speak to that. Sometimes like they've said, pre-planning week is so jam-packed. Like teachers get very little time in their rooms to lesson plan, to even, if you have a Braille student and you're anxiously waiting to get started on the Braille they're going to need for the next week of school starting, those teachers haven't even had time to be in their rooms until, the end of the first week. And we have to respect that because I mean, we're pulled in a million directions, but they certainly are too. So I think that Teresa's, going in and Andrea just with this fact sheet, okay, you're going to have the student, and obviously you want to do that before open house because you don't want a parent coming in with their student and the teachers have no clue. Oh, what do you mean I have a visually impaired student, and losing their mind, and then that makes us all look poorly, right? So that piece, but then a lot of times your teachers will have PLCs, right? So they're getting together as, groups, and you can ask to just have 10 minutes in that group. And so my experience is I always have one teacher in that group, whether it's reading or language arts, who's worked with my kids over time, who can say, oh my gosh, it's going to be great. You're going to be so happy to have these students. It's helped me become a more organized teacher. There's always someone in that group that can add positive to your conversation. And that's always helped the other teachers. And then they become a resource. Like, what did you do for this? How did you incorporate your students into this? In language arts in the middle school, there's a lot of like hands-on arts type things pulled into that curriculum. And this last year, the teacher was like, oh, don't worry about it. I already talked to the teacher they had last year. This is what she did, and it was awesome. And she's like, she even had some materials in her room, and this is what we're going to do. Like, oh, that's perfect. Like, so they just become another resource. And so that's helped. PLCs have definitely helped me personally.
Yeah. So then it's not just the TVI who needs to answer those questions, but somebody who's actually been there already and had to solve some of the same problems and worked with you and understand the needs of the students. So yeah, that's a great idea. So if that's an option, if it's a student who's in the same school and they've just gone up a grade level, that sounds like a great way to approach that. I'm just looking in the chat. Oh, somebody was saying, I think this is Andrea, that's where having student folders is so helpful. So if you are getting a student that's new to you and you've got a folder that has information on the students, so you're not just starting from scratch, like, I don't know anything about the student other than their IEP and their FBLMA. So yeah, those can be a great resource. Oh, bye, Elaine. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so our next question is for Teresa. So Do your in-services look different for students who use Braille versus print or dual media?
Well, yes, they do, because Braille, a student who is a Braille user, they take up a lot of more space in a classroom than maybe a low vision student. So usually like in the elementary, the early elementary, like K1 and 2, depends on how your K is. If they're using the big rectangle tables, there's usually enough space to keep their all their accessories. But in like first, second, and third grade, I usually tell the teacher they're going to need 2 desks, you know, and then we set that up in like an L-shaped arrangement.
Kind of like a, yeah.
One horizontal, you know, like this, a 90-degree angle. And then because they're going to need a place to read their books, and with a rubber mat there, and then the Braille writer or whatever tool they have is sitting, you know, on the desk. And then I show them the Braille textbooks and how much space they take up. So I also have like a metal divider, you know, for file folders, but that sits on top of a little rolling cart. For my Braille readers, I have a rolling cart that has the different drawers in it that we keep their different tactile graphics tools, their Braille paper, things like that. And then the Braille textbook is standing vertically on top of that. And in the resource room is where I keep the rest of the volumes for the Braille textbook. So that way they're only having the current volume for their language, for reading, for science, and for math in the classroom. Because, you know, Braille textbooks take up a lot of space. And then the other thing, if I have a Braille reader, I discuss with the teacher, I've got to have these materials a week in advance to prepare them, especially if there's any sort of graphics that are going to have to go along with a math or a science textbook in particular, or a lot of map work, maybe in a social studies book. So I usually have a mailbox in my class in the school. And so they usually just slide it right up in there. And they put sticky notes on it. This is the date I need this by, or when we're going to present it in class. So I'm also in my school, my classroom is in the media center. So the teachers also know where that is. And I have it set up in there that there's those, again, those file folders are up, and I've got for each student an in and an out. So that way for Braille production, we know this is what we got to work on. And then a paraprofessional or the teacher or I can walk the prepared materials back to the classroom.
Yeah.
It's
So
a little bit different for a Braille reader.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, all the extra equipment, the production time needed for materials. So do you all, when you're doing, like, when you're meeting with teachers, do you bring them like a volume of a Braille textbook to show them? And like, I know some teachers, they have logs where they say like, this is what I received. And so to give them an idea, like, this is how long it takes me to produce typically, or your para to produce something in Braille. So is that something that a lot of you do?
Yeah, we definitely take in a volume and say, oh, like here's the algebra. This is volume 1 of 46, right? So this is why we need some space in your room. And for in the middle school, kind of set the expectation the student's gonna go grab their book off the shelf. You know, as they progress through middle school, like they're independent in gathering their materials at that point. So yeah, we do that. My peer has, for this year, is making a video of the time it takes to make a tactile graphic, a typical tactile graphic to be presented at a faculty meeting. And then also Braille, like, okay, here's this worksheet. And so that teachers can have a better idea of what that timing looks like. I mean, there's so many graphics used now. And so, yeah, so we can prioritize and explain the process. And we have a Braille log that all of our paras or Brailles can access that shows the work for all of us so that they can help each other when it's needed. But still, this, I think that, you know, as much as you communicate, oh, I need this, I need this, I need this, our teachers are also being given work last minute from their SALs and their team leaders and district coordinators and of their subject area at my level, I imagine at the high school level too. So it just kind of goes downhill, right? But yeah, so we explain our process of the log and just the law for Braille too. Just, you know, it's access. It's
yeah, exactly. Oh, go ahead, Leah.
I'm sorry. Another trick that we use, probably like in the middle school and high school too, is communicating with the department heads. So not that, and I let our classroom teachers know, and some of the classroom teachers, the work comes from department heads, like they're waiting on tests or worksheets because it's a group, you know, and it's a lot more so in the math, they're all wanting to use the same materials. So I go directly to the department head and they put me on those emails. So when they email all the other math teachers, I'm already on that email. So we're getting everything at the same time. And like that may shave off a day or two, but that at least just gets us in with science. Science, there's so many graphics in science, and just getting on those email lists or getting those relationships with department heads helps feed you that materials also, because they also know it's coming months in advance. And I think we'll all agree we welcome any work months in advance so we can start preparing those things.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I never would have thought of that, but you're right. There are a lot of schools and that are like that, where it's like, yeah, you're all going to use the same thing and it's coming from the district. So if they already have it, you don't have to wait. Just get it right from the source.
exactly.
Yeah. And I think too, that just helping teachers understand, it's not like we just push a button and it makes it into Braille or taxographic. Like, no, this is a very labor intensive process that takes a lot of human, you know, thinking and decision making. So yeah, that's an ongoing battle for us.
Right. And I would just say, if in particular, if you have a Braille student that you are having to create materials for, last year our district, wow, they really went heavy into the PowerPoints for even little kids. And so when you're creating your in-service at the beginning of the year with a teacher, you just really need to find out, okay, how far in advance are you getting those PowerPoints? Because you're just going to project it up there onto that whiteboard. And if I'm sitting in the classroom, in the math classroom, I might be able to Braille up a math equation very quickly, but some of those have graphics on them. So a very important part of the in-service with the teacher is, you know, when you can get together and the planning, or what are you using PowerPoints, highlight for me, what part of it do I need to have in hard format for my student? And then just, you know, you don't want to overwhelm them at the beginning of the year. But it's like, just, I'm a member of your team. I really want my student to be successful. You want them to be successful. So I'm going to help you get organized, because you're going to know this stuff before everybody else. Always be about helping them. Always be about helping them.
Yes, I'm here to help. That what you said made me think of something, Teresa. So last year, with all that virtual instruction going on, I think across the board, there's a realization it would be great if these files were accessible from the get-go, like these PowerPoints and everything that teachers are making, so our students who use devices could access them. Did you see that happening? If not, like, how did you approach that? Maybe this is just more for my own curiosity, but you know, that's a conversation that we could be having with teachers during in-services as well. So I'm just curious what that looked like for you all.
Well, in the early elementary, I have to produce everything for them, you know, in hard format. And they also bring in a lot of these little videos that are very cute, you know, and there's a lot, you know, a lot going on in those videos too. So I think that the teachers gradually get it after they've, you know, seen and worked with a blind student for a while. It's like, oh, you're right. Now, how are we going to make this accessible for them? So I don't produce entire PowerPoints for a student because there's a lot of stuff in there that's really, they can just do it auditorily.
Mhm.
But I need to know from them, okay, what do they need? What do I have to have underneath their fingers?
Mhm.
Because honestly, my students don't have the computer skills in the early elementary that they can Wi-Fi in with a refreshable Braille display.
Yeah, yes, and that makes perfect sense. Yeah. So Shaylene, you look like you're gonna say something.
Yeah, so for us, our students got the Braille Note Touches like a month before closure last year. And so we had just started, you know, working on those. It wasn't as seamless of a transition from the Braille Note Apexes that they had before. There's some new things they had to learn or had to learn. So it really forced very quick instruction when we went into closure. But we did a lot of things were put up, and Canvas or not Canvas. What was the platform that we used as a district before that? Leah, do you remember?
Is it Effie?
Edsby, yes. So they, their teachers would put, and we didn't utilize Edsby like that prior to closure. So it's not like my students were used to going on Edsby and pulling work and accessing files that way. But we would pull the work, some of it, and then email it to the students. So that was a skill that we worked on. And then working within those documents, it kind of forced a lot of instruction that maybe wouldn't have happened so soon or so quickly. But for a lot of our students, it was a very good thing. You know, obviously our students, they're individuals. They've come to being visually impaired at different times in their lives. So some are more ready for that level of technology. We had one that said, I want hard copy Braille. Like this is stressing me out so much in an already stressful time. Okay, thank you for letting us know. It was hard copy Braille delivery every Saturday. So, so it was student driven too on what they were comfortable with. But some of our students, their technology skills really excelled. But it did sometimes require us to say, hey, this isn't accessible. And we ended up having to turn it around and make it, you know, reformat, redo, because teachers were overwhelmed at that time too. It was like a crazy time, right?
Yeah, to ask them to learn how to make accessible documents.
It's not going to happen. But I think that's important. I think those are important things for teachers to know. I know that there's some great videos out there on how to do it that I would love, you know, especially for my teachers who are so awesome about providing Braille in advance, you know, materials in advance for Braille. I know that they would be very open to doing that and learning how to do that.
Yeah, that's great.
To piggyback off of that, especially going to high school, it is so PowerPoint based within the instruction. The teachers, everything is being presented in PowerPoint, and the expectation from our students is to, well, just pull it off your device. And in a beautiful world, that would make sense, right? They open their device. We've had this training in using Canvas, but a teacher that I worked with last year had an in-service with the technology person at our school who we work really close with, and how to make your PowerPoints accessible to our students. How they can put, you know, if you're having an image, well, how can you describe that image to the student who's visually impaired? Thankfully, a lot of our teachers were very open to that. We had some teachers would send us a whole separate Word document where she put all the PowerPoint information into the Word document for the student. That's very rare that happens. Most of the time we do that. But I think it's just during that in-service is providing when you give us this materials, how much more difficult it can be for our students. And if we can break that down for the teacher, I think sometimes it gives them a little glimpse into, okay, how can I give this to my student and make it easier for them?
Yeah, and it's something that even us at FIMC, we had to learn, like, oh yeah, so when we're creating a Word file, we need to use heading levels and, you know, how to use that accessibility checker in PowerPoint. But once you learn it, it's not hard. And I think teachers, yeah, I think teachers, if they realize like this is going to help all of your students, like, oh, you know, not just the students that are visually impaired. So yeah, if we could move more towards that, and that let's focus on the content, not so much all the fluffy, you know, making it pretty and making it. So that's one of the things that we're always trying to work toward here at FIMC. But yeah, and I can see districts going forward trying to make accessibility more important, and hopefully that's true. Okay, so we have just a couple questions left and then we'll wrap up. But so our next question is for Andrea. So we talk about a couple different populations of students with visual impairments. What about for your students with multiple disabilities when you're doing an in-service or educating teachers about those students?
Most of my actual TVI experience has been with students who are multiply impaired. And it's also very different than your typical vanilla blind student. Oftentimes these students learn very differently because they have a different sensory diet or they have a different sleep schedule and stuff like that. And so a lot of times I don't really know how the student's going to behave or how the student's going to learn until I actually work with the student for a couple months. And then once I gather all that information, I let the teachers know. But in the beginning, I do let them know just the basics about what we do know about their vision, whether they're cortical visual impairment, whether they're TVI, or anything along those lines, and how they may access their print materials or their learning materials that's being presented to them.
And so if you have, like somebody was saying, if you have like a folder or something on the student from the previous TVI, then maybe you can use those resources. And even
And a
what we
lot
were,
of times it's different because they don't really do summer school. So they're on a break from May all the way up until August. So their sleep schedule may be completely messed up from what it used to be when they were in school. Or they now may be able to actually eat foods, whereas before they weren't able to eat foods and stuff like that. So a lot of the times you're learning this student over again, even if you did have them the previous year.
yeah, and they might have fallen out of the routine that they were using before. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, just making sure those teachers know that you're there as a resource. And even like we said before, maybe I did have a student like that where I got the teacher in touch with their previous teacher, you know, so they could talk to that person, ask them questions if it was something that I couldn't answer. So yeah, so all different kinds of approaches that we use, just whatever we can to make sure the student is getting what they need. Okay, so our next question is for Shaylene. We had a little conversation about this. Do you provide activities using low vision simulators, and what does that look like?
So there have been a few times that we have done that, and it's always been student driven. So like when we're presenting in the big group, whether it's been at a faculty meeting that's been set aside for our students or Great American Teach-In. And the two instances where when our students, there was a time, it's gotten better, but there was a time that our school is really difficult for our students to navigate due to student behaviors, running, and just what felt like very out of control things happening. And our students were becoming very, very paranoid about traveling during transition times. And so one of the things was to present. And so the students set up, like, and this was all like the group of students, I think there was 10 or 11 students at that time. And they wanted to do like a whole like travel on campus with all of these activities, doors slamming and people running by you, under simulation with O&M specialists there. So staff from FIMC came to help us out, and they wanted students to experience it, but they also wanted administration to experience it so they could understand why it needed to change, and teachers to experience it because teachers were not monitoring those behaviors. And so that was very, very impactful. But they always start, and the other instance was a student, it was driven by a low vision student who was progressively losing his vision, and he was becoming very agitated about the lack of descriptive language being used in the classroom and classrooms, even though he was advocating for it. Like, I don't know what that means. Can you give me more information? So he presented a child's book that required a lot of information from images, and he had the teachers put on the simulators. He read the story, and then he gave them a quiz on that story, and they obviously could not really take that quiz. And so that was very eye-opening for them too. But we started and ended, with, you have the privilege of taking the simulator off, and I don't. And so please keep that in mind. Like, this is just a little experience for you, and this is my life. And so I think that was really important for them to say that, and for the teachers to hear that. So, but it did go very well, those two instances that we used.
Yeah, and I really like that the students were the ones, so it's not like the adults coming in saying, here, let's do this, and so you can see no, the students telling them, and they're explaining why these things need to change, or helping them understand why they need something done differently.
Exactly.
Oh, I thought I heard somebody saying something. Okay. And I know that there's different schools of thought on using low vision simulators, but I think if it is for a very specific reason that you're doing it, like to help somebody understand, like we were saying, why something needs to be done differently. We're not trying to make people feel bad for the student or anything like that. And we know that a lot of times it's not going to be an accurate representation of the student's vision. So, making sure they understand that, but sometimes it truly is the only way to get that message across. Otherwise they just might not understand why you're asking for something. Okay, so our next question is for Leah. So we've talked about all these different strategies for in-services. And so what if you have a classroom teacher, you've done what you wanted to, and the classroom teacher is not following through on what you shared with them and what you asked them to do?
Okay, this is definitely a very multi-layered answer. My first, usually I'm informed of this because the student is telling me, they'll come in with the print copy. They did this today. Okay, and then it's the next day. They did this again today. So now I'm learning that the student is sitting in class being presented, especially a Braille reader, with a print copy of material that he has no access to. So I'm going to gather information from the student. If there's para push-in, I'm going to gather some information from the para, and then I'm going to go speak directly to the teacher. I know sometimes emails can be faster, which I have emailed teachers, but I feel like just going directly to the teacher and speaking with them, it's just you're gonna get more information from the teacher. Sometimes they are overwhelmed and they're literally getting the worksheet that day. So then that means I need to go to speak to the department head, and I need to get administration involved. I have worked with teachers who are just blatantly reluctant to provide the students what we need for them to be successful. If that is the case where we're having to go back and forth, I'm sending emails. I've had some teachers send daily email reminders. Don't forget to send your Braille at the end of the day. I've gone and met with teachers before first period and said, I need your Braille for today. But that puts more work on me. The students, especially in the high school setting, are very aware when there's conflict with the teacher, when that teacher just does not want to go and do what that student needs. So if it's a continuous process where the teacher is just not wanting to cooperate in our students' needs, I email administration, and I also let parents know what's going on, because if I'm reaching out to administration, I feel like I'm getting to a level where I need parents to know what's happening. And sadly, and hopefully it doesn't result to it, but oftentimes I'll move being in the high school setting, we have the option to move that student to a different class, and I'll move them to a different class. But the first goal, though, is to try to resolve whatever issue is happening with the teacher. Maybe it is something that we all have lives outside of school too. So maybe something is happening and that her and I, or he and I, can talk it out and figure it out and come up with a different plan. I have had teachers, send me information differently versus an email. And when we're trying to produce Braille, we'll get it any way we can to make that happen for the student. So it's just a lot of communication, but it does come down to if, the student needs to sit in the front and the teacher says, well, it's by alphabetical order. And sometimes you have to use those big words that now they're going against their IEP. And that's a big deal. You can't, if we have accommodations in place for that student, we have to follow those accommodations. They're not options. It's a requirement that we need to provide that to the student. And sometimes when you use that bigger language, it makes them realize that this is a very serious thing that we need to be providing to our students. And I think it's just really important to have administration support too, because ultimately they're the ones. I've had administrators pull teachers into their office to have conversations about why we need these things for the students. So short answer, I think it's just figuring out what the problem is and trying to solve why it's not working. And if it's never going to work with that teacher, you can kind of feel that out with the teacher. I just remove the student that day and put them in a different setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense. So you want to start with the teacher and then move up as needed, making sure the parents aware of what's going on. And I think what you said really highlights the importance of, at the beginning of the school year, making sure the administration knows who you are. So for those itinerant teachers, like here, I'm serving the students. So if you have those kinds of problems and you go to them, they remember who you are, not like, who are you and why are you telling me this, So I think, for our itinerant teachers to keep that in mind. And so I know for you all being in a resource setting, so you do get to know the teachers, right? Like, so you realize like, okay, we're going to avoid these teachers. These teachers are great with our students. So we're going to make sure our students get into those classes. What suggestions would you have for itinerant teachers with that sort of thing? Like if they're looking at a student schedule, trying to figure out what teachers would be good for them to go with. I mean, can you think of any?
That can definitely be difficult, especially if that student is maybe at a middle school or a high school where they've never had a student with a visual impairment there at the school. And, we build really good relationships with guidance counselors also. So when, we sit ideally with guidance a week before school to look at all their schedules. And sometimes guidance is very honest, like, oh, we're not going to put them with that teacher. So to go into a new school to have no kind of people in your corner, that can be really difficult. So sometimes you have to just blindly send them out there. And I was itinerant for a few years, and so I tried to establish with the ESE specialist, because if we're not there every day and the student has a problem, I want that student to be able to go to the ESE specialist and she can assist, or at least let me know immediately if what's happening, so I can make a schedule or change my schedule to come in as soon as possible to solve whatever issue is happening in the classroom. And sometimes going back to uncooperating teachers, I will push in with the student. I will come and I'll sit at the back of the class and I will observe what the problem is and how. Sometimes it's an immediate solution on how we can solve something. But in the itinerant world, it definitely gets hard because you're not there every single day and you can't just get up from your desk and go, solve whatever solution that is. So I think it goes back to having relationships with the school, at least one person in the school that you can communicate with, and that student feels comfortable communicating with if there's a problem.
Yeah, and I would imagine too, talking to the administration, like, well, who are your most organized teachers that are really good at planning ahead and always have their lesson plans in when you want them to. Like those are the kinds of teachers that we want for our students. So I think that would be another strategy. Okay.
And I think too, when there's problems with our, the upper ages, sometimes the most impactful thing is the students sending the email. And we had a situation last year where a student sent 3 emails 3 weeks in a row, like, you have not uploaded any work on Canvas. I have nothing to do. And it was an elective. And after no response, he directly emailed our APC who does the scheduling and said, can you please do a schedule change? I've had no work. I don't want to be sitting here for the 50 minutes with no work. I have no idea what my grade is. And that it was absolutely done. What elective do you want to have? And so sometimes that is a really more impacting than me like, always, because I absolutely will. But I think that if the kids start doing it too, or it's, both of you saying, hey, here's a problem. And I think Leah hit the nail on the head too, is just part of our job is to educate parents of what they should be expecting for their students too. You should expect that your student is going into class and having their materials in front of them. And you should expect that if it's classwork, your child has the opportunity to do it in class and it's not homework just because it wasn't accessible on the day that the classwork was done, right? And so I think as part of, sometimes we need to do in-services for parents. This is what middle school looks like, and this is how here's the steps of the hierarchy of solving issues. And me, the teacher, the ESE specialist, the AP, so that they know, because oftentimes for me, it's direct to me. And I'm like, if you used your voice beyond me, this would change in a heartbeat, right? Because now I have to go and be that voice. So I think that is another in-service that is often very helpful, is direct to parents.
Yes, I had a student where it was the same thing. We were advocating for a change for that student, and it was not until the parent contacted someone higher up that it changed. The TVIs could bang on that drum for forever, and it wasn't until the parent came in. So yeah, I think sometimes they don't know how much power they have.
Right. And sometimes they're so grateful that they have you. They don't, especially when it comes to Braille, they're like, we don't want to cause problems for you. So I've had where, let me show you this log that we keep. Here's the assignments we've been given for your student, right? And if that assignment is not on there, it's because we didn't get it. So this is what we're doing on our end, right? So that's the voice, is you're not sending things. Like, don't worry about getting me in trouble. I have what I need to show that what we're producing, what we're supposed to produce, or what we've been given to produce. And so sometimes I think that's part of it, is they're just so grateful to have our support. They don't want to ruffle anything. And it's like, no, please, go ahead. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Teresa, you look like you were going to say something. No?
Well, if you can avoid having our students go into a brand newbie teacher classroom, that would be the ideal world, because everybody remembers their first year teaching, but classroom teachers, they have mentors that are coming in, and there's a lot of things that are already on a new teacher's plate, that if you have an option to have your visually impaired student placed in a classroom that's not a brand new year one teacher, I would hardly suggest that. Just because it's not to say a new teacher isn't awesome and great and caring and would love to have a student, but there is a lot of change and everything is just coming at them, and they're just trying to figure out the lingo. That even though they've done a student teaching experience, I still think the first year is very overwhelming for all new teachers.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Okay. I'm just looking in the chat. Yeah, so Andrea was, so we got Andrea here, I think it is, saying that she remembers Leah sharing a long time ago that she would bring in her card. So I guess your business card with Hershey Kisses to school secretaries to win over some of the school staff as an itinerant. Was that you, Leah?
Yes, I had a secretary at a school that I went to every morning. And I was first year teacher, bright and cheery. I cannot wait to come to work every day. And man, she pooped on that every single time I saw her. But I was determined because she was my go-to person. I had to check in with her every morning because I saw the student during homeroom in the middle school. So, and I saw her before the bell rang. So every day where we met was different. And I needed to rely on her. Are we in guidance? We're in the library. Like, where am I allowed to set up shop? And I would bring in treats every morning to her. I found out when her birthday was, and I brought in cake and a balloon. I did everything, and it's that year. Also, my first year teaching was when I became pregnant with our daughter. So then once I became pregnant, then she thought that was the greatest thing, and then she was nice to me. And maybe you got to fake a pregnancy sometimes to get people to like you. But I think doing anything, Teresa's idea and bringing teachers treats is fantastic. I think if you bring in donuts every Friday to the front office staff, like they're gonna remember you because you bring in donuts. You teach the vision students, or any type of little things I think is important just to help establish you as a positive person in the school setting. And then when you do run into a problem, sometimes it's not going to come off as abrasive because they know all your positive history. And now when you're having a problem, I feel like more people are more receptive to immediately solving the issue. But yes, I brought in lots of treats. Janitors are a great resource too. If your students need an extra desk, moving things around in the classroom, they're really great people to have relationships with too, because they are also someone that can really help you get anything done within furniture type things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Make that so they have a positive association with you when they see you. And there's something else I was gonna say to that, but just lost my mind. Okay, well, so let's see what else we have in the chat. Oh yeah, and those people in the school are also the ones keeping track of all the books that come to the school during the summer. And that's what I was gonna say. So just like with our parents, when we're telling parents how the students are doing, like you don't want it to always be negative, you want it to be positive. So you want your overall relationship with the school staff to be positive, where it's not the only time they ever hear from you is something bad, something negative. So, okay, so I think we are ready for our last question, which is going to be for Teresa. So in one sentence or more, if you like, what is your goal when providing in-services?
Well, my goal is to make that classroom teacher feel very comfortable and welcoming to have a visually impaired student in their classroom, that they know that I'm there to help them. It won't be an overwhelming experience. And I just want them to be comfortable and ready to welcome that student as eagerly as they do any other student in their classroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. That you're there to help. They're not alone. Mm-hmm. We're in it together. Yeah. And there was one thing that I did want to just mention, that so on IEPs, at least in Hillsborough, and I think the peer IEP has this as well, there's that section for support for school personnel. So that's the place where the TDI is putting, so we're collaborating with the gen ed teachers in Hillsborough, that a lot of the teachers they put that they're going to provide an in-service to classroom teachers. So it's right there in the IEP. So if anyone looks at it, they know that's something that's going to happen. So that's part of where this whole role of the TVI comes from as well, that we are there to educate other people about our.
And the IEP is something great to say when you're trying to set it up. We have all new administration the last few years at Burnett, and it was like, here, this is IEP driven. This is just an expectation. And oh, okay, great. I've never worked with that population before. I didn't understand that. So it's, you know, it helps you to advocate for what you need to do to establish there on the IEP.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
you
when
know,
you're, oh, go ahead,
so,
Leah.
like, going back to the beginning too, like when we're making those fact sheets, I always print a full copy of the IEP also, so they can really see how much is involved with our students. Like, I love the fact sheet; it's easy to read and gather quick information. But I feel like that no teacher can go back and say, "Well, I didn't read his IEP." Well, we gave you a copy, and then I'll even highlight the section where the accommodations are, put a tab on it, so they can see all the different things that our student is allowable for them to access during the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, because our students do typically have pretty long IEPs, I would say, comparatively. So they can be high needs. All right, so I'm going to share my PowerPoint again, and I didn't see any questions. Yeah, low incidence high needs. I think that's what our supervisor Kay always says. Okay, so unless any of you had any other things that you wanted to add or say, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. All right. Right. So in the PowerPoint, you'll see that we have some examples of the things that our wonderful panelists talked about today. This slide here, which is a handout in the folder that's on our website, is an example of a fact sheet on a student. So it's that one-page document that Teresa provided, so you all can just get an idea of what that might look like, borrow it, make it your own, so matches up with what your student needs. And then these are some pictures that she shared so you can remember what that little bucket looks like. The gift with the business card and those wonderful handy tools provided as well, so the teacher doesn't have to go buy some new dry erase markers to replace her old faded ones. And then we also have, so you might want some pictures of, I think this would especially be for, so if you have pictures of what the student had this current year and you're sharing for the teacher coming up, like, see, this is the kind of space that the student needed. They had this desk and then this rolling cart with all their materials in here. And then within the rolling cart, all of these wonderful tools that the student needs to be able to access everything that's going on in the classroom. So their Braille paper, various tactile stickers and dots and scissors and glue, and their abacus, tactile rulers, all kinds of good stuff.
Lisa, that's so great. I mean, I never worked with little ones in resource, but that whole tiered drawer setting is fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, it usually works through third grade. And then, you know, in fourth grade, they start departmentalizing. So they start going mobile. I mean, they're just moving twice a day. So then we kind of have to make those backpack friendly, you know, to keep their supplies in the backpack.
Yeah, yeah, they're not going to be able to carry all that around with them.
No.
All right. And so that's it for our pictures. So we wanted to let all of you know and share this with your friends and your classroom teachers that we at FIMC have created a course on our Canvas site. So if you are signed up with our Canvas site, you know that right now there's a whole bunch of resources for TBIs and discussion boards. But within that, we're creating a separate course specifically for classroom teachers and other people who are not TBIs that are serving our students. And it's called What to Do If You Have a Student with a Visual Impairment in Your Classroom. And so what we did is adapt some training videos that were developed by Dr. Tina Herzberg and Dr. Penny Rosenblum. It's just a series of, I think, 10 videos that we broke up into different modules. So they watch the videos and there's quizzes and they can get in-service credit. So it's just a very general overview of our students. This wouldn't replace an in-service because this doesn't tell the teachers what the specific unique needs of your student are, but it gives them an idea of like what's an O&M instructor, what's an FBLMA, you know, what's visual acuity. Like I don't know what any of these things are. So we're going to be launching this sometime after September 2021. We do have a link. I don't know if I can copy that out of here or if Sherry is putting that in the chat because I lost
I
my
did. I put it in the chat, Liz.
Okay, thank you,
You're good.
Sherry. Yeah, so if you know teachers that want to sign up for that, have them fill out the form. We'll be advertising this as well, so you can keep an eye out for emails, and then you can pass that on to the classroom teachers in your life, and they can get in-service credit. And Sherry, do you remember how many points they get?
I think it's going to be somewhere between 6 and 10.
Okay. All right,
But
and
it's totally self-paced. They can do it on their own outside when they have time.
exactly, yeah, it's completely independent. There's no no meetings that they have to go to or anything like that.
And so can I ask a question, Sherry? Does that count towards their hours of students with disabilities? That
Yes,
they have to
yes, it would totally count towards that, which is one of the reasons why we set it up that way. So they have to get credit hours for students with disabilities. So why not get it in something that's appropriate and that they could use on a day-to-day basis? They can do it at their own pace, and it will be available towards the end of September. So
Thank you.
Yeah, so get those get that advertised. And just so you all know, this is completely unrelated, but if people go and look at that sign up form, you're going to notice that on that same form there's sign up for another, this should actually say course, another course on our Canvas site. So if you're familiar with UEB online, they had a literary course that you could go to learn UEB. Now they have UEB Math Science, which was formerly called UEB Technical. There's 3 different groups. It starts with beginning, and then I think like intermediate, and then like an expert level. Those are not the words they use, but essentially it builds on itself to higher levels of math. There's 30 modules. So we created a schedule where you're doing about 1 module a week. And Haley Locker, our Braille specialist, is going to be facilitating this. So if you want to brush up on this or learn this, you can follow the schedule, and we're going to have meetings. There's going to be a discussion board. So if you get stuck or you have questions, then we will help you out with that. So to sign up for that, you're going to use the same form that Sherry put in the chat. We will have an orientation to help people kind of understand how this is all going to work sometime in late August. We give everyone a chance to start the school year, and then we'll get into that. And just so you all know, our upcoming webinars, we have the Florida Low Vision Initiative is doing their updates next Friday from 10 to 12 in the morning. Our first info and updates is Thursday, August 26th. That's primarily for our new teachers who are unfamiliar with FIMC-VI, but we do have some new things going on. So if you want to join that, we'll be talking about all of our various services, how to get materials from us like APH products and all that good stuff. And all of these, any upcoming trainings that we have are always on the event page of our website, fimcvi.org/events. And just want to make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. Am I, Sherry?
Nope, you're good. I'm just putting links in so
Okay.
that they can just click on the link if they want to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, and so here, if you all could do an evaluation of this webinar. So there's multiple ways to get to this. Excuse me, you can use this QR code. There's a bit.ly, which is bit.ly/FIMC-eval. This survey is always at the, it's on our events page. I think it's also on the forms page of our website. We try to make it very accessible, but basically it's 4 very brief questions that we report to the DOE. And it helps us show what we're doing and how we're meeting the needs of our teachers, and if there's anything that we need to be doing differently. So if you all could take a moment to pull that up. I'll leave this slide here for a second.
I also put the link in the chat box, so you can just click on that link and go to it that way if that works for you.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Okay, so we're almost there. We're almost to the end. So if you are looking for in-service credit, you will get 1.5 credits for this webinar. That's what most of ours are because they're usually an hour and a half long. But the closing code that you need is focused. So FOCUSED, focused. And so this is a separate QR code you can use to access that. We've got the bit.ly here, which ends with FIMC-CEUS. And when you fill that form out, a certificate will be emailed back to you. If you don't get the certificate within a day, something has gone wrong on the back end, and contact us and we'll get that figured out. But just make sure you follow the directions on that. And when you fill that form out, you're putting in your opening and your closing codes. Okay, and so that is it. So here's all of our contact information. We are on all kinds of social media, but I just want to thank you four ladies so much for this wonderful conversation. I think this was absolutely fabulous to hear all of your different experiences, your different ways of approaching everything. There's so many great ideas here that I know everyone's going to take at least one thing and use it with their students. So I appreciate all of you for sacrificing your Wednesday before you have to go back to pre-planning. And hopefully we can all do this again sometime. I don't know. I kind of like this panel discussion format. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and let me look in my chat real quick. And I think, I'm assuming everyone in the chat is saying thank you as well, but of course I can't seem to get that to open.
They are. They said, what a fantastic job. Thank you. There were great ideas. It was fantastic. Everybody was very positive. Great information. Thank you very much, ladies.
Yeah, thank you. And so don't